guys, it's Hengist here from House of Hengist Comics. Big welcome back to the front line, Beansters. Today it is BLITZSTEEL, episode 35 in the Blitzkrieg series, the Battle of Hannut Part 2. First the news though, and we'll take a quick journey back to the Ardennes, where we basically see the Germans break through the so-called impenetrable barrier that it is. However, the Germans have made good time. They've made corduroy roads, they've got through, and this is their big target, crossing the Meuse basically, and the battles of Sedan and Stonne, they'll all be coming up, guys, because this is the critical part of Blitzkrieg, this crossing which basically cuts the French in half. As we can see here, the Panzer group that we're looking at is in the north and the Sedan crossing in the south. All over this area really is ideal tank country, and the French tanks have been able to move up, and we zoom in here on the confrontation zone between 3rd and 2nd DLM versus 3rd and 4th Panzer under Hannut. Now there's a staggered progression of attacks as this go through, as we can see here in this map, but ultimately we're looking at around 650 German panzers against basically 480 French. Okay, let's look at the German forces and their organizations now in a little bit more depth. Obviously these are panzer divisions, they're supported by infantry, but in terms of the numbers, there were 2 divisions with 2 regiments each, and they had 2 brigades. Approximately 330 odd tanks in each, but this is the interesting stuff, the stats. So do freeze this. We're only looking at, ultimately a very, very small number of Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs, no more than 20% of that Panzer force, and they are going to need to be supported in all their strikes forward. And sometimes this is why I find I get a bit frustrated when I see unrealistic representations with far too much medium and heavier armour on the German forces. But for the French, they've got effectively 2 divisions as well. Their formation is slightly different in that they have 2 brigades. The first really contains the tank regiments, and again, if you freeze this you'll get more detail. But they've got about 240 tanks in each regiment, plus these important Panhard armoured cars. But if you look up at the makeup here, nearly I think 80% are tanks which the Germans really struggle to take on. Those Panhards also become very powerful with that 45mm gun as well. And we've also got the AMR 35s too. But basically the Hotchkiss is the bulk of the tanks really used by the French forces in these battles, and their anti-tank guns are critical, as well as their lorries and transports. But it's a very bloody battle. I would point out also there's a great site here. If we go to Little Wars, you can get a really good starting point on working on a division. Right, let's look at the rules and concepts for this mini-series, because basically what we're looking at is all these stars represent basically supply points and victory locations. So the Germans and the French have got to refit and refuel, and that's an important component part. So after 12 turns they've run out of both, and so that they are going to either refit on the stars they've taken, or they're going to rely effectively on the mobile supply trucks, both sides having one of these each, but they have to go back and effectively refit. So it's going to be quite difficult basically to keep the panzers moving unless you've taken the time to get organised. Also the recovery vehicles, and maintaining the battlefield at the end of a battle is really important to recover, and the Germans were very, very good at this. So this is really rather important too. And we've tried to put that all into these ACHTUNG Panzer wargaming rules. So without further ado, let's get into what actually happened in the last episode, or what was previously on this this battle. Well, here's the initial. Hannut is up in the north corner. This is the first segment of this battle. It will roll back, and we see the panzers racing forward, running into effectively a column of refugees. The Germans are basically struggling because of this hill, which is dominated by Hotchkiss tanks, but they've moved up their motorsier into the town, and we'll see town fighting take place there as the panzers sort of engage, having to send some forces as they begin to think about switching flanks, so to speak. There's a running tank battle which opens up in the centre, and the Hotchkisses are proving pretty invulnerable, but then Stukas attack and cause damage, and we're nicely set really for the next stage of this battle as the town fighting intensifies. We can see ultimately a big tank battle develop here on this map. Now that's how it's going to rotate back. Okay, let's get into the battle action, guys, for this episode. And the first thing we see in the midst of all this fire is a recovery vehicle bring a Panzer II back into action. You need a 6 on that. We've got the gun line set up, and that's firing and putting pressure on these Hotchkisses on the hill. They're still in deep trouble, basically bogging down, trying to get organised. The French decide to start pulling stuff and falling back onto the second line of defence. And we can see this is how we keep a running chart of what is actually going on. They pulled out in turn 6, as you can see there. But the Panhards have moved now away from their position and moving through the town as the Germans start to advance with that little Geb gun in the north, and it's opening fire on the buildings, as we can see here, causing a lot of problems. As we get more French reserves arrive, they're going towards the farm, which was unoccupied, and they're going to try and garrison that because the French want to pull out, and they need to keep a supply point on this table and delay the panzers that are moving down onto this flank. So they've got anti-tank guns there, and the little Vorrads have had to scupper now into sort of I suppose concealment, because they are about to face some tanks which are arriving and the anti-tank guns. Meanwhile in the town, some of the Panzer IIs and Panzer Is move up, and we can also see concentrated fire around and support with the engineers as well around these Pak 36s. However, they start to take losses. They lose a gun as the last of the refugees get off the table, and then an airstrike from the Stukas, which basically come wailing in the penultimate turn, flying over the position. But basically they are not that decisive or effective, but the French are very, very frightened. And at the moment these are the losses, very minor at this stage. The AM-35 platoon wiped out. We've also got a repair that's conducted on a Hotchkiss tank as well, as this German position now is very strong, and they're starting to feed troops to the other flank. But the little Belgian anti-tank guns come out, they have a pop, and they hit a Panzer II, destroying it. There's a wince. Those Panzer IIs are very powerful for the Germans. The Geb basically returns fire and damages and knocks out another vehicle, as we can see here, as the Panhards are coming up to get to that flank. Then we get some H-35s arrived near the farm, and the civilians basically at last exit the table finally. We've also got assaults now from the German infantry that are trying to clear the town. It's very robust fighting. The French motorised basically effectively are wiped out as the Germans take that position, but they're starting to take casualties. The pioneers, as you can see, are dug in, and here's a repair truck bringing back a Pak 36 which was knocked out, as artillery ranges down from the French, who are pounding this position, trying to destroy the guns and effectively pin and restrain the rate of fire from the Pak 36s. Here the light tanks are moving forward to that flank, as you can see, whittling along, and again trying to draw them out. But the commander then decides to switch back as another Panzer I is knocked out by those tank hunters. You can see the door knockers steadily going down that road, taking withering rifle fire. We've got the Vorrads concealed, basically gone to ground in those woods. Here come the tanks basically towards them. And we can see that this position on this side is very, it's not well supported by the French. And the Germans are beginning to manoeuvre and get themselves together. They've sent half their tanks now around that flank as the infantry start to clear, but take more and more casualties. The tanks continue to support them, again, as you can see, supporting everything that they move and fire to. Stukas come in again, basically doing the best they can. This time they do manage to knock out another tank, but the Germans now switch back, and with their slightly later Panzer IIs that have got the front armour too, they start to engage. The French armour is now not smoked, but is trying to fall back. As you can see, an overview of this battle, they're starting to take casualties. The town fighting, you can't really see much of what's going on because everything's in buildings. And this is where we see those the 2Ds basically move forward towards this ridgeline. You can see the amount of damage that's been inflicted by door knockers. They keep continuing traversing forward and opening fire, catching one Hotchkiss in the rear, but it bounces off, and we can see a refitting process start now early with the supply truck, refitting the combat engineers, which was an interesting first choice. We've also got more fighting in the town. We've got support from these Panzer 1s and Panzer 2s, but they are struggling in that town against the tank destroyers. But the Gebs, they continue to press down that road as we've got more and more artillery firing onto these Panzer 2Ds now. One is knocked out by a Hotchkiss and she bruised right up, much to, again, the Germans' concern. That's a good tank for them. Again, look at the French state. They're in trouble now, and they're beginning to realise that they can't take on these door knockers, and they've got to start retreating. And we've got a very, very interesting situation as we look at the damage now, and you can see that. Do freeze it and have a quick look. We've also got on this hill line still more bogging problems as basically the Germans begin to press now. They're hot on the tail of the retreating French that are now going to be running back as this battle begins to turn the Germans' way. But the casualties they're suffering from the infantry are quite high. You know, 2 or 3 platoons now broken from the French and the Belgians. The hill line, all of this lot needs resupply, as the white markers denote. You can see these white markers suggesting, because we're in turn 12, what forces need refitting, and there's a lot of them. So now neither force had really started refitting earlier enough, I believe, and that could be problematic because tanks could run out of fuel or ammunition on the rolls of a 1 and get trapped as the French pull back. Here are the Panzer 1s over there supporting. They have to move back to get to a refit point. We can see the French refit 2 tanks on this hill because they own that objective. And the Germans also refit theirs because they've got an objective there as well. But the truck has moved over to the light tanks, and that's going to refit and then be sent to the rear. And here the pack gun line is fully orchestrated and ready to support and fire. 3 guns are dug in, 1 is not. As the recovery truck brings the last Pack 36 back, we get reserves again, more Motorstier arriving towards the town. Thank God, say the Germans, they need more infantry. And we can see from this vantage point, the 2 Panzer 2s are basically commanding that position, but they are facing 3 Hotchkiss tanks. The German infantry have moved forward now and are about to disgorge. AA trucks arrive with the arrival of the Panzer III tanks. And these Panzer IIIs and these Motorstier are fully refitted and fresh. So this is going to be looking really, really dangerous for the French if they pull out and break down. And this is where the revolving sort of tablescape is going to work. It could be very, very dodgy and sticky for both forces. You can see the French starting to withdraw, basically. They're worried now every time they've got to move and there's no displacement. You know, they could run out of fuel or ammunition. But the Belgians and the French, you know, motorised, keep fighting in that town. And now they return their tanks, falling back, praying that they don't run out of fuel. It's a very, very tense moment, and a lot is going to come in stage 3. So it's to be continued, guys, I'm afraid, till part 3 comes up. So what can we say in Postscript? Well, so far this is really, really working very, very well indeed. It's very tense, a lot of damage to the H-35s. But if we look at the tactical situation, here you can see the German manoeuvres and what is going on. And basically, the French are starting to pull out. The green basically denote the French in the south. And what's going to happen is the table is going to revolve back. And here are the next sort of line, so to speak, that the French have occupied. They've got some troops, they haven't committed them from their reserves, and some have already fallen back. So it's going to be a running battle over this terrain. Well, all this research gets me to get inspired, and basically I love the detail, and I like trying to recreate as best as I can what I see from the historical record. And here I've tried to build an SDK. I've used this Vesta vehicle with loads of parts from PSC, and I think I've done all right with it. I had to cut the back of the doors out, a bit of a job, but yeah, she looks really good as far as I'm concerned with the K for Kleist. We're also going to possibly see Gruber from Hello. He may be turning up. And in the meantime, guys, a generation was lost, you know, especially in these battles. So let us never forget, basically, the fallen. And until next time, stay safe. This is Blitzkrieg. It's over and out from me. Bye for now.